I've heard of a lot of special needs parents who have been asked to leave churches because their, kids are not able to integrate into the ministry, and the ministries don't know how to handle it or what to do. And so, they looking at it, I don't think their intent is to exclude, but they're looking at their entire ministry and the kids that they have, and they just get to a point and go, we don't know how to handle this. And so families leave, and then they go to another church and another church and another church. And man, I carry a burden for that. Hi, my name is Craig Wilson. I am a 30-year veteran of children's and family ministry. I love pastoring kids and those who lead them. And this is my faithly story.
Could you share your faith journey with us?
Yeah. So for me, I did not grow up in the church. I was a product of divorced family, very young, early age. My mother was married twice and divorced twice. And so that meant a lot of moving around. And at fifth grade, I moved to a different area, new geography, new town. And believe it or not, there was a friend of mine who's still a great friend today, who at that young age had the wherewithal and understanding that he was supposed to fulfill the Great Commission. And one of his ways of doing that was just simply by inviting this new kid in his neighborhood to go to church with him. And that was foreign to me. I outside of a couple of brief stints in a Catholic church where, I was just disappointed that I didn't get that yummy wafer they were passing out to everybody. I hadn't had much experience in church. And so I went, and I can remember vividly, I literally spilt an entire communion tray of grape juice on white pants my first time at a church. And my friend thought, oh gosh, he's never coming back, But what superseded that was such a profound sense, even at that age, of community and family that I was missing in my own family. And it became a haven for me. And that's where my faith journey started. And then a couple of years later, up at a summer camp with my friend who invited me, asking me if he wanted me to walk, if I wanted him to walk down with me to surrender my life to Jesus wholly. And that's where it began.
This was in fifth grade?
Fifth grade. Yeah. Fifth grade is when he invited me. Seventh grade was the camp. So from fifth grade, I was attending the church fairly regularly, plugging into the community of children's church there in middle school. And it was middle school, seventh grade, that I gave my life fully over to the Lord at a Christian camp that we attended. Yeah.
What was your understanding for you to want to give your life to Jesus at seventh grade?
Yeah, I think like I mentioned before, that deep sense of family and community and relationship was an important starting point for me. And but that alone isn't enough, right? Because you can find some good community in other places and clubs and organizations. But what that was for me at that time, and the leaders that we had, who had a deep sense of care for my being, how I was doing, who I was becoming. We were fortunate at that church to have the same leaders travel with us, from many of them from junior high, stay with the group of kids all the way till we graduated. I think I had the same ones through middle school, and then a set of new ones at high school level. And those ones stayed with us the 4 years. That was very impressionable upon me. But of course, out of that then came conversations about faith and who Jesus was, and me as a sinner and my need to surrender to him. So for me, it made sense, and I think for me also at that age, lacking a father figure in my life, God as father was fairly impactful on me as well.
Yeah, a theme that's been reoccurring in these podcasts is stability, either in the home or in the church. And you need at least one, but if you don't have either, that's kind of a disaster. Yeah. Ideally, you would want both.
Yeah.
Were you able to process what was happening with your mom and the relationships, and also did you have a relationship with your dad, or was he just out of?
No, my dad, like I said, my mom was married twice, divorced twice when I was a young age. So my real father was out of my life by maybe 2 years old, which I wouldn't have much memory or recollection of him. I kind of have a faint memory of seeing him at first or second grade, and then for a weekend in seventh grade. And then that was it. So just completely absent. And then, my stepfather, I have memories of him in my time that my mother was married to him, but I would say he was out of my life after that marriage ended as well. So I really didn't, and so within the church youth group and the godly men who did have families were the ones that I spent most of my time there. And, they included me in father-son activities, and they were checking in on me when I was goofing around in school and deciding I didn't want to go to school. And they kind of take me to lunch and be that fatherly figure, even the tough part of like, hey, Craig, what are you doing? You got to be better than that. You can do this, So I had a lot of support surrogately from the men that were involved in the youth group there, which was phenomenal, amazing.
Um, did you ever talk to your mom about all that? Because for me, my parents divorced, but I was like way older. But I
Mm-hmm.
remember when I was younger, I would just ask my mom, like, how did you guys even meet? And like, why are you guys together? And like the joke between me and her was like, God only brought them together to have me, right? Like, it's a narcissistic viewpoint. But for
Yeah.
you, like, and it took a really long time for me to forgive my mom. And I know that
Mm,
sounds like to some people like ridiculous, but like I harbored this thing of like, I kind of blamed her, not because of what my dad did, but just for staying with him. So, like for
sure.
you, like I can't even imagine what that's like, and how would you even approach a conversation?
Yeah, Daniel, it's interesting. I think every journey is different, and every person's journey in that situation is different. I will say this to paint kind of a parallel experience. So my good friend, the one who invited me to church, also was in a single mother household. And so for me, with my father out of my life early on, I always see you don't know what you don't know. And so when people say, well, do you miss that? Did you desire that relationship? Well, I didn't know what a relationship with a father was like because I didn't experience. So there was no loss of that, you know? And I think that early on, because when it was crucial, I think when you hit that preteen and middle school, where life becomes, you start turning to peer pressure and, things start to unravel a little bit. Having those key mentor figures in your life is important. And I had that. So cut to my friend whose dad, they were divorced, but his dad was kind of in and out of his life. And I watched the tension and turmoil of that because his dad was constantly making promises that he didn't follow through on and didn't keep. And the mind games and tension between the mom and the dad, that created more, I believe, emotional damage and difficulty in his life. And so I look at my situation and I feel it was better. And even older, people would ask, and even my wife would ask, do you think you'll go look for your father, or your father will come looking for you at any time? And I didn't have a desire to do that because I didn't have a relationship with him. When I have my own kids, these profound questions arise in your heart when you have a kid and your attention to that, just this life form that you have this just unbelievable love for, and unconditional love for. You have these questions of like, gosh, how could somebody just abandon family, know they have a son and a daughter out there and not have any contact? And there could be a million reasons for it. I think later in my life, it wasn't until later in my life when I was an adult, I was able to have those conversations with my mom about their relationship. And you find out a lot of it. He was alcoholic and couldn't function in life. And so at that point, the forgivenesses I can deal with, knowing that as an alcoholic, he couldn't function normally, process normally, grieve normally, in the way to understand that, I could have a sense of, okay, it's the disease and the issue of alcoholism. So there's a level of, I didn't have a sense that I had to forgive him, for things. I just had that wonderment of like, gosh, how could somebody know? Like having my own kid, I couldn't imagine that. But my journey and my path is different. So yeah. So I think for me, again, you don't know what you don't know. So not having that father figure in my life, I didn't grieve the loss of something that I never had, but I had an incredible community in my church. There was one man in particular that at my wedding I gave him the seat of honor where my father would sit for my wedding. Because of his impact on my life.
Thank you for that. That's actually a
Yeah.
very refreshing perspective that I didn't even have insight to. So how did you get into pastoring?
Yeah, I was kind of I think kind of like Jonah trying to run away from it a bit. I growing up, my plans for life were entertainment industry. I was pretty much interested in self glorification. Of I want to be famous, I want to be actor, singer, something in the spotlight, and I followed after those dreams and those things. And the church I was at was back in the day heavily involved in a lot of arts and entertainment stuff. They would do a lot of theater in the community, at the church for the community, Broadway shows and things like that. So I was fortunate to be around arts and entertainment, even within the church context. And so at about, I think at about 20 years old, I was pretty much just going to community college and taking mostly acting and music classes. And our music director at the time said, "Hey, I'm starting a kids program on Sunday nights, and it's going to be kind of like, think Mickey Mouse Club, but with Bible-based lessons in it. There's going to be dancing, singing, acting, funny characters, all of that stuff." And he asked me to do it, and I really had no interest. I had no interest in working with kids. And he came back and asked me another time, said, "I really need guys. I have a lot of girls interested and need some more guys." I think I told him no 3, 4 times, and then he finally just begged and pleaded. And I said, "Okay, I'll do it as a favor to you." And I got into it, and oh my gosh, I was hooked. It was very revealing for me. That was, I say I'm called to be a children's pastor, and I get weird looks about that sometimes, because I'm 54 and I still feel effective in children's ministry. And people say, "Oh, are you going to bump up to family pastor? Or are you going to bump up to lead pastor someday?" And I don't believe that's my calling. And so doing that, it was like this culmination of God taking everything that I was passionate about and the things that I was talented in, and he was showing me a better purpose for them. And I can to this day remember Rachel Stewart, kindergarten kid, who at one of the early programs that we did, just coming and wrapping her arms around me. I used to sometimes get emotional still thinking about this, because it's just so vivid, all these years later, but wrapping her arms around me and saying, "Thank you for making learning about Jesus so much fun." And it was just like, boom, that's it. And so I was doing that program. And then a few months into it, the director who was doing all the creative elements of it, had moved out of state. And so the children's pastor there asked me if I would take that over. And I started an internship. I didn't go to school. I didn't go to Bible college. I went to Bible college later and would take some courses and things, but it wasn't my plan. But I was mentored by him for 6 years, which was the best experience, because I had the freedom to risk and fail with a safety net. And a lot of leaders today get into ministry without a safety net, and they get burned once or twice, and then they're done and they're out. And so I had an incredible safety net to risk and fail and have somebody take the heat when I would mess up, and pick me back up and put me back into the arena to keep going at it. And so, and after about 6 years, and I was, handed the keys, "Hey, this is your ministry now." And and here I am, still engaged in children's and family ministry, all these years later.
Yeah, like when I applied for the children's role at my most previous church, I had no interest, but it
Mm,
was like the only thing that was available. So I was just like applying everywhere. And then when I
yeah,
got it, yeah, there were just rough moments, but overall, looking back, children's is a lot of fun because
yeah.
that's all they care about, having fun. But if you can make like the gospel fun and Jesus
Yeah.
fun, yeah, it was the best ministry years of my
Yeah.
life, I can honestly say.
What I would say,
Um,
what's the first question usually a parent asks when they pick up their kid from church? "Did you have fun today?"
when they pick up,
When a
oh,
parent picks up a kid from church, the first question they ask usually is, "Did you have fun today?" It's not, occasionally you'll get the parent go, "What did you learn today? Tell me the Bible verse you memorized today." But usually the first question is, "Did you have fun today?" Why? Fun is a value. Are we teaching the Bible? Of course we are, but it needs to be fun. Adults, they're not coming if you don't have donuts and coffee, Starbucks coffee out in the lobby. That's their fun, right? Kids aren't coming if it's not fun. So it needs to be fun.
No, but that's kind of a shame because something I've been like really learning more and more recently is like the childlike heartness, right? But also we can also
Mm.
have a childlikeness in the mind, which is just curiosity. And like children are always
Yeah.
curious, and I'm curious where along the way for us as Christians we lose that, and then we get so caught up in like this is right, this is wrong, this is what I know, and then we start debating about what we know rather than like, oh, how can you take that and use your imagination to see like the goodness of God? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think, sometimes we just, yeah, somewhere along the line, we overcomplicate things. I don't know if adultize them is a word, but if it isn't, I just made a new word, adultize. Hashtag adultize, get the website going. But we do. And I think that there's a need to come to Jesus with that childlike faith. And I think even within that is that fun. When you think about I think about Pixar movies and cartoons. And what's great about those is it kind of blends this line between, it captures kids, but it still captures the adult heart. It has that sensibility. And I think there's a place for that in church ministry. I think there's a place to simplify. We do a baptism class, for lack of a better word, for our kids when we're teaching them about why we get baptized. And it's always for us a family class. It's designed for parents to come with kids so we can help equip them and resource them and make them part of the process. And I'd say over 30 plus years of doing children's ministry, I'd be willing to guess we've baptized just as many adults as we have kids through that class because we've explained it in such a simple way. And there's been a good number of parents sitting there who hadn't been baptized. And just because it was explained in such a simple, fun, but meaningful and powerful way that a lot of parents just went, oh, I guess I should probably do that. Why haven't I done that yet? And so I think, yeah, there's definitely a place to come into our faith with a childlikeness, like you're saying.
So how do you, based on your experience, integrate parents getting involved? Because one issue I always had was they treat children's ministry like it's a babysitting service. So they'll drop off the
Yeah.
kids, they'll disappear, they'll come back, but they'll never like connect or ask questions. And I'm just
Yeah.
curious as to like, yeah, how do you integrate that?
Yeah, I think, for all the years of, you have, the orange philosophy, which came into being with, Rethink Group, and they do a phenomenal job of the strategy and vision for that. Churches overall in the last couple of decades are pushing more of this, idea of family ministry. How do we come alongside parents, equip and resource them to be the primary role in their family? And I still think it's a challenge. I still think that we're struggling to do it. And I think you're going to get so many different opinions and strategies and mission and vision around this. You have a lot now that say we quit pulling the kids out of church and do church together all the time and more, or at least have them in for worship together and then split out. And then you have others who say, well, no, there's still value in splitting out because we can talk to kids in their language and pastor them in a unique way. And even you see some healthy amount of infighting about that, and that's always good. Discussion and even a little bit of healthy arguing helps us get better at things. So I don't know that I wouldn't come and say, gosh, I've solved that and it's amazing. I have these amazing, incredible, engaged parents and families, because every family is different, right? I mean, take me, who's a single kid in a family that had no faith and wasn't going to church. So I can't, if I have that kid in my ministry, I can't just say, well, your mom and dad are your primary spiritual role model, because they're not. And then you have the mom and dad who are in church, and maybe the mom is really on fire and dad is, just kind of not really engaged and not walking. And that, I would say, Daniel, is probably more prevalent than a lot of other family situations. That's our dads are really just not stepping into leading their family, their wives and their children spiritually. And so if there's a group of people to really pour into and target, I think it's men. And then it can't just come from the children's ministry department. It has to be a value and part of the DNA of the entire church ministry. And so now that's going to be a struggle or an effective joy depending on the church and ministry you're in. There's a lot of times in church ministry we get siloed, working in all these ministries, and even some like, well, my ministry is most important and mine's most, well, how come I don't get enough attention here? And this ministry has more budget, and this ministry, what that does is tends to isolate us. And one of my pastors used this illustration, and it probably, he probably lifted it off of somewhere else, or maybe it was his own original thought. I don't know where it originated from, but he was sharing with our staff. He said, sometimes we have our own ministry, and you think of it as a train, and I have like my car. My car is pretty unique: children's ministry, and then men's ministry, women's ministry, worship ministry. He says, and that's okay. He says, the problem is that we're also on our own individual train tracks. We're all going the same place, but we're getting there on our own track. And so sometimes we're getting ahead or behind somebody. And he says, what I want us to do is pull all of our individual cars onto the one track. And that way we're pushing and pulling each other toward the same destination. Because even sometimes then, hey, this one car is dragging a little, but that's okay because the two cars behind it are pushing it and the two in front of it are pulling it. And then another time, that car that was struggling 6 months ago is now driving hard and pushing the car that's slower in front of it. And I think that's a good picture of how we need to do that, because something that big with family ministry and getting men engaged is going to take the entire church. It's going to take the youth ministry and the men's ministry and the preaching from the pulpit and the children's ministry to all believe it's important. So every family's situation is different. And so I think that's why it's hard. But we can't throw our hands up and say, well, it's just not working, so let's not bother and let's just do children's ministry. I have to provide the resources. I have to encourage parents. I have to equip them. I have to pray for them and with them. And I have to think about the kid whose parents aren't there. And so it's a challenge, but it's one worth us, digging our heels in and keep grinding at it.
I'm definitely gonna steal that train analogy. That's really good. I
Yeah.
can't believe I never
Yeah.
thought of that.
That's one with me for a long time, and I carry it with me everywhere I go because I think it is a good analogy for that. And so yeah, it's going to take every ministry for the big things that are important, and for us to stop looking at we need to celebrate.
Yeah, I want to trade notes with you now. So, like, what's been the hardest thing for you in children's ministry?
I think so. Post COVID, volunteer leader engagement has definitely been down, but overall, in church engagement, I think that we hit a point, about a year ago that it's kind of like, all right, I feel like this is just my observation, my experience. We were kind of all watching fall 2021 to see what was going to happen. Because fall 2020, like we thought we were coming out of the bend with COVID, and then all of a sudden kind of, resurged in areas where depending on where you live, counties shut back down and schools shut back down. And so when 2021 came, I think there was like this hesitancy of people returning, at least in the ministry areas that I were in, and they were watching what was going to happen with the fall. And then it seemed like, okay, feels like we're out of the woods, or for whatever reasons, wherever you stand on COVID, it just seemed like all of a sudden there was a big number of people back, but there was a big number of people back, but not engaged in serving, or we'd lost some of those people. And so now you had this crowd back, but you didn't have the infrastructure to minister effectively in your children's areas. At least that's one of the things I experienced. So that's been a challenge, and kind of trying to catch people up with training and discipling and vision casting, get some new people that you're trying to get fast tracked. And so I think that maybe where you had a system, if you had a system in place where like, oh, you can't serve till you've been around the church for 6 months, and then you're going to go through a discipleship process and training process a little bit. In some ministries, it's just like, are you breathing? You have a pulse? You love Jesus? We did a background check. You're good there. Let's go. And so I think that's been hard for some, is getting back to that, and where you feel like, okay, we're equipped to handle the crowds that are coming back in as people are re-engaging. So that's been one thing there. I think another challenge has been just the change in kid demographics in regards to special needs. and special needs, especially around the area of like behavioral challenges. I always hate statistics because, they're usually wrong. I probably am the same guy who would say, oh, 1 in 6. And the next time I say it, 1 in 4, and then 1 in 8. But the rise of kids who are experiencing behavioral challenges, or, you have kids on the special needs spectrum is so broad, right? It's so broad. And so it requires so many different, I believe, like, levels of expertise on how do we train and how do we lead these kids well. And so I think that's a growing challenge. And I feel like a lot of churches are starting to do more with that. But there's some of the challenges are where you have that may need a one-on-one assistant, one-on-one leader, one-on-one buddy, however you want to call that, to be able to be included into your regular children's ministry programming, which is, we always say we want what's best, what the parent wants, and working with the kid and what's best for them. You have some kids that would just go to a special needs room environment, and some that can be functional within your regular ministry on Sunday morning, but they might require an assistant. So now when you're trying to find a leader for, every 6 to 8 kids, and now you might have 4 or 5 kids in your ministry that need a one-on-one buddy. So casting that vision, training, kind of debunking what people think about special needs, and I couldn't do that, and I don't understand that, and I'm training for that. I think that's a challenge in today's children's ministry, and probably one that's going to keep growing. But, there's a deep burden to minister to every child, and so how do we do that? What does that look like? And it's going to require changing and approaches to things, and may require expertise and kinds of staffing. A lot of children's ministry people, we don't have that kind of training and that kind of expertise. So, we got to search out the resources, or churches have to start maybe even putting their money where their mouth is and say, we're going to hire somebody with special needs expertise, because there's a lot of families out there that's their life, and the joys of it and the struggles of it. And how do we come alongside them and give them a home? I've heard of a lot of special needs parents who have been asked to leave churches because their kids are not able to integrate into the ministry, and the ministries don't know how to handle it or what to do. And so, they looking at it, I don't think their intent is to exclude, but they're looking at their entire ministry and the kids that they have, and they just get to a point and go, we don't know how to handle this. And so families are leaving, and they go to another church and another church and another church. And man, I carry a burden for that. Those the divorce rate among special needs families is high. They're on an island. They don't have, resources and the support that they need, and I feel like if we can come alongside them and do the best we can, I say do the best you can with the resources you have. And you might not be able to do everything, but what can you do to what point?
Do you have any advice then for people who don't have the resources? Where can they go to even seek out answers?
Yeah, one is called Key Ministry, Key, like a keyministry.org. It has a lot of free resources and training and videos. And I think you can even bring some people out if you wanted to put some money into bring some experts out to do some training. But they have a lot of resources and a Facebook group page. And early on, when I came to ministry in Colorado, and this was, 12, 13 years ago, prior to me getting there had been a special needs ministry that was run by a volunteer who was running it as if she was getting paid like $100,000 a year. I mean, she was just going all out. And people with special needs families were driving 2 hours to come because they had a place for their kids to belong. She was doing respite nights on like Friday nights where parents could drop their kids off and go have a date night and stare at each other, because special needs parents, don't get to do that a lot. She was even running special parties for siblings of special needs kids, because siblings of special needs kids lose a lot of attention because of the extra attention it requires for their sibling. And so was just running this amazing thing. But before I got to that ministry, she had to move across the country because of her husband's job. And so that ministry just shrunk down to a very dedicated group of people who had a huge heart for it. So I had no experience in it, but I had this group of people who had a heart and a passion for it. Could we do what that woman was doing? Nope. But could we do something? Yes. So I say start somewhere. Do what you can. Try and come alongside a parent that's been asked to leave a church 2 or 3 times. Sometimes they want to sit down with you and be heard and know that I can't make promises like that we can work this out. But I can promise that we will do everything within the resources we have to try and provide spiritual care for your child and for you guys. I think just saying that sometimes goes a long way. I remember a family like that came, their kid was prone to acting out with violence and had some behavioral challenges. And they came to our church the first time, and they didn't tell anybody. They just wanted to, I hope it goes well, because they've been asked to leave 3 or 4 churches. And on that first day that kid was there, he was pre-teenage, 4th and 5th grade. He had gotten a kid down on the ground and was kicking that kid. And so when the parents came to pick him up, my director, who's an amazing director, came and talked to the parents. And as soon as she started talking to the parents, you could just see their countenance drop, and you could just feel it. Probably everything in them was saying, we're going to be asked to leave. And my director said, hey, we're sorry that this happened today. Is there anything we can know that would help us create an environment where, I can't remember the kid's name, let's just say Johnny, can be here? And oh my gosh, the relief, and that mom just bawling because someone was just saying, I'm willing, weren't promising, but what can we do? And there's sometimes in situations where you go, we've exhausted everything we can. We've tried a buddy, and there's still issue. We've had you guys join class, and there comes sometimes where you have to say, and we have to think about everybody, and we don't have the resources to do this. But all right, if we can't do this, can we do this? And I think just that effort, goes a long way. I used to tell our special needs parents that would leave, I'd say, hey, you know what? If you guys haven't been able to be on a date together in a while, I go, ditching church and going to brunch and staring at each other for 2 hours might be the best worship for you this morning. So if you want to do that, just let us know that's where you'll be so we can get a hold of you. And I think just that commitment to say we care goes a long way. And then do what you can. I'm in a small church now. Again, I don't have the resources for a large special needs ministry. I don't have a director, but there's something we can do to help out.
I'm so glad you said all of that because I feel like we give up too easily, and God really just cares if we have a willing heart, right?
Mm-hmm.
And a spirit that just says, hey, doesn't matter if we failed 100 times. We trust in a God that provides. And so we're going to keep trying just so that like people understand that they're loved even when things go crazy. And I think the
Yeah.
families appreciate that. And even what you said about like skipping church and like going on a brunch, that's like sounds so blasphemous. But I realize if deep down in your heart, you can honestly say, because of what I've just experienced, it's worth it. And it's worth
Yeah.
it because it helps me understand the goodness of God. That's worship, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like you can go to a church and sing all the songs, but still kind of feel empty, right? Because
Yeah.
you weren't connecting. Or you can have this like magnificent spiritual experience on mushrooms, right? But it involves no other people, right? It's just this like
Yeah.
it's just me and God. It's like, no, that's not how like Christianity works. It's like it's all of us.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
something that I learned, in the past is that no matter how big the problem is, if you have enough people willing to work
Mm-hmm.
together, you can always come up with a
Yeah.
solution. And like you were saying, like the problem happens when I feel like I have to be the one that finds
Mm-hmm.
the ultimate solution or the silver bullet rather than, okay, what can we all do to contribute a little bit to make this
Right.
thing work? And
You don't know
that's
who's
when magic
sitting.
happens.
Yeah. You don't know who's sitting in your church right now that's never once thought about helping with special needs, but you presented a simple low bar opportunity and they jumped in, and just like God captured my heart and passion for kids ministry, somebody might just light somebody on fire for special needs, and they might take that ministry to another level. That person could be sitting in your ministry right now, and so yeah, start somewhere, and then let God draw the people to it. And the church I'm at right now has an incredible ministry to special needs adults. And so they have that value, and there's been some people that have had a heart for that. But what's missing there is some support for special needs kids. So interesting, but that's kind of where God has called them for these years. All right, well, gosh, we have this. How great would it be if we can start building, special needs ministry from the young age, and then as if they're part of our church through the whole church, because that's what happens a lot of times too, is special needs gets relegated to children's ministry, and then junior high hits and your youth ministry is not doing anything about it. So there's not that team approach and team effort. And so that's another one of those things. How do we get everybody on the same? If we care about special needs families, we care about them from birth to adulthood, and what does that look like? And so, and there's lots of things you can do. We used to have a guy come to our church who has special needs daughter, and he's a financial planner, retired one. So he's not doing it to get your business, but he comes and does free seminars for special needs families on how to plan financially, because it's different. And what happens if both you and your wife die? What happens if your kid needs full-time care? Can't, again, the spectrum is so different. If kids are functional and can work and have their own apartment, independent, but some need to be in home and community with others. And he would just come, we would do that seminar, Daniel, and there'd be 100 people there, and maybe only 20 of them were from our church. And he's just telling them all this stuff they don't know about. You need to start with your county because there's money available to you. But you got to start it at 10 years old so that you get it by the time he's 18. And their jaws are just dropping. Well, there was an incredible outreach opportunity for people in your community to know that there's a church that cares about my family. Why would you do this seminar for free and helping us with that? There's so many opportunities there. And so allow God to allow the people in your church to dream of how they could help, because it's not always how we think, is the best way to do it. Other people have different ideas that God's giving them on how to best minister to groups of people.
The beauty of family is that when one person is affected, the whole family is affected, right? And oftentimes
Mm-hmm.
in the Western world, we're so surgical of oh, it just helped the
Mm-hmm.
kid. But no, you don't realize helping the kid helps the family, right? But if
Yeah.
you get the family involved with the whole CPA thing too, yeah, offering services just so that the entire family is involved and they understand there's a support system. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I never really thought of it that way too. So I'm not saying all of this because I knew it. I'm just oh, everything you're saying is God is putting all the Lego pieces and family. How did your childhood growing up affect you as a father?
Yeah. Well, I think I alluded to it a little bit earlier in the sense that not having a father figure in my life, that was my blood father, but having, mentors and people in my life helped shape who I am. But I think also just having that later in life sense of that wonderment of how somebody could leave, kids behind, it changes your perspective on how you look at your own kids and your engagement level. And, it's a challenge for everybody. Time is the biggest challenge for all of us. And ministry is challenging. Ministry is time eating. How do you as a father whose job is to essentially play with kids, I'm tired of playing with kids. I'm too tired to come home and play with my own kids. I had those moments, where I used to run a Wednesday night program back in the days when midweek was thriving. I know it's still thriving for some churches, but in the demographics that I've ministered to, sports rule, and so midweek kids aren't at church anymore. They're on the sports field. But back in the day, we had a preteen ministry of 5th and 6th grade kids, and we ran up to 150 kids sometimes on a Wednesday night, 5th and 6th graders. And, it was amazing, but it's sucked everything out of me, and then you get home and you just want to la, 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 you don't want any questions. You don't want any, because you just need to kind of just unwind from that. And I'm extreme extrovert, but when I get it all out, then I just need to kind of retreat, and I introvert. And so, yeah, coming home and then not having energy, for your own kids, oh, that's a terrible thing, So like all parents, and dads do that, and moms do that, they're working, and sometimes you got to dig deep because it is fast, all the things they told you are true. You blink and they're grown up. I have a 25-year-old and a 21-year-old, and gosh, I can look back and beat myself up, about some times where I go, I wish I would have just, engaged a little more here, engaged a little more here. So I do a lot of speaking for camps, kids camps, and I always tried to take at least one kid with me if I went away so that I wasn't just away from family. And my kids have some great memories of, being at camp. And then that's almost like they're getting free camp, they get to engage and play. And the church leaders, the camp leaders would always, just let them be a camper, the weeks they were there. So they had that spiritual influence and impact, but they were with me and got to see what their dad was doing, so that was important. So I've had the freedom to do those kind of things. But ministry, does have its challenges depending on the ministry environment you're in, how much you're working and how much you can be away from family.
Yeah, there's a saying: the days are long, but the years are short, and that's so true as you get
Mm.
older.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
Um,
Yeah. We're all a product of our experiences, and I am, I have a friend say all of us are smarter than one of us. And like, I am a product of the people that I've been under. I've been just very fortunate to work under mentors and leaders. And like, I, everything I'm talking about is just from experiences that I got to be in part of. And sure, within that, I able to add, I think, how God has gifted me and wired me, but it doesn't start with me. I know there are people, I have an entrepreneurial heart, but there's some people that God gifts to just sit and create from nothing, and I just am so much better for me when somebody spits something out and then I go, oh, and can work from that and build upon that. And so I'm a product of that. I'm a product of the mentoring and the coaching and the people pouring into me. And so my favorite thing is to, all right, how do I, especially now I'm 54, 30 plus years in ministry. And this season, what God is showing me, I believe, and what is God is opening the doors for me to do is to pour that back into other leaders who are newer and growing. And even at 54, I talk to young children's ministry people that maybe came to me for some advice, and I'm just sitting there writing down everything they're saying, and I'm like, this is brilliant, this is amazing, hey, so it's learning from each other, and pouring into each other. That's what story does, that's what community does. So my experiences are what has shaped me. It's not, I don't consider myself a prolific leader. I consider myself being fortunate to be in the environments that I've been in, and rub shoulders with the people that God's allowed me to rub shoulders with.
what is the fondest memory you have from childhood?
Oh gosh, fondest memory from childhood. That's an interesting question. Even like, I have, we were going through the old buckets of pictures and things like that and realized that there's really not even any pictures of me younger than like fourth or fifth grade. So I think my fondest from childhood are, my family was fairly small because of just the divorce and just having one side. So some of my fondest memories were times at my grandmother's house because my mom was a single mom. So I spent a lot of time there in her kitchen. There's things that are so tangible to me today. Like my grandmother, the only soda she would ever have is a squirt soda, right? And if to this day I could open a can of that and just the smell and the taste will put me in her living room, you know.
What
Uh,
squirt?
Squirt, it's just a soda. You can still buy it. It's like a citrus soda, but
Gotcha.
it's like an unusual soda, right? Usually you want root beer or Dr. Pepper or Coke, but that's the only one my grandmother had, and it wasn't great. But if I wanted something sweet and sugary, it's the only one I was going to have. And so to this day, I crack a can of that, and it will put me in my grandmother's living room because we played cards and she baked with us, and we just had that time. And same with my great uncle. He just had all these. He's traveled the world, and so he had all these unusual collectible items, and things like that. Was very fascinating to me to spend that time with him as a child. So those are some of my fondest memories were of our small kind of tight knit family that, yeah, no big trips or no big vacations or anything like that. Just that time in the homes of my family members.
What's the best advice you've ever received?
Oh, the best advice I've ever received. Maybe I haven't got it yet.
Or the best so far? that was really helpful to you?
I'll give you one related to ministry. And, ministry's hard. It's hard now. The environments in ministry, the kind of leaders we have, some environments can be tough places to work. There's a lot of people burning out, leaving ministry, and they're hurt. And I've been kicked in the teeth a few times. And I remember leaving a church where I had some real hurt from leadership, and there was just things that were happening there that I just, I reverted to my young punk rock self and just wanted to burn it all down. And my leadership coach and mentor at the time, he said, it's your job to protect the bride of Christ on your way out of here. And it went against everything in my being at that time. And he said, Craig, he says, I know you're hurt. You're even just in what you want to do. But he says, your job is to protect the bride on your way out. And that was some of the best ministry advice I ever had. And that sticks with me. And I try and impart that on people when they're leaving a tough situation, where even if in your heart you're right and you're just and you've been wronged, protect the bride on your way out. So
That's so good. I'm gonna take that. That might be one of the best advice I've heard.
It's not easy. It is not easy, but it's right. Yeah.
It's just like real marriage. It's gonna be hard, but
Yeah.
if you don't have battle scars, like, did you ever grow? You know?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And you always, in hindsight, will see, even in a tough situation, even in a valley, even, how God grew you. It doesn't come till later, usually. And then sometimes there's even some amends you might have to make and some olive branches that you probably have to extend, but allow yourself and you will grow. But on your way out, protect the bride and the people in that congregation. So
that's why forgiveness and reconciliation is such a wild idea and so
mhm.
counterintuitive to the world, because
Yeah.
it's the only thing that continues to keep people together if they
Yeah.
forgive and reconcile. And it's
Yeah.
just, anyway, that's another rant I don't want to get into. I'm just like you. Like, I always thought I don't have an original idea. I'm not creative. I need other sources. But I realized no one has an original idea because we're all
Yeah.
sponges, right?
Right.
And
Yeah.
so this is why words and stories are powerful, because it sparks like
Yeah.
some memory or imagination. And yeah, I just really believe like that's just God is showing us like his mind, in the Trinity. Anyway, that's just another thing.
Yeah.
Final
Yeah.
two questions.
Absolutely. Yep.
What are you hoping for at Faithly?
Yeah. I'm hoping for, look, there's a lot of resources out. There's a lot of networks, and I go to different ones for different things. I might go to this Facebook page because I can easily ask a question about, like, hey, who has a great idea for first grade boys to blah, 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 blah. And I'll get, 20 people that'll give me ideas for free, 5 that are trying to sell me their stuff to do it, 2 that are just watching to see what everybody else says. And so I have a place, and I'm not knocking that. I might have sounded a little snarky when I said that, and I didn't mean that. I have those resources to go to. And I have resources that I, sell and give out to people. But I think for Faithly, what I think may feel different is the community aspect of it, and to try and dive beyond just resource mentality and sight into relationship, and, like you say, story, and iron sharpening iron. When I got on, I was just, looking around, and I got into your groups. I am in this season, Daniel, of where I feel God's calling me to. I still want to be active in church ministry. I currently I'm at a friend's church helping him out, and I'm doing that part-time while I am trying to, I'm coming on board with an organization called Standing Stone Ministry, that's primary role is to shepherd pastors that have been through stuff and going through difficult times, and giving them that place to do that. And I have a heart to do that for children's ministry people and family people, because I think they're underserved. There's always a sabbatical for a lead pastor, an associate pastor, and a worship pastor, and sometimes even a youth pastor. There's always a conference. There's always resources, and send them out. And I see a lot of children's pastors having to pay for that themselves if they want it or they can't afford it. And so with Standing Stone, I will be supported like a missionary. I'll raise my support so that I can go to a children's ministry person and say, hey, are you struggling? Are you going through some tough things in your ministry with leadership and stuff? I can come alongside you and meet with you for a time and help walk you through some things for the experiences that I've had. And I want to do that specifically for children's ministry and family ministry people. And so I think even Faithfully can just even be an extension of that, to gather like-minded people who are in that area of ministry and just, hey, how do we, and again, it's not about, oh, hey, come to Craig. I've got so much experience. I'm amazing. You just sit and let me just stand on my pedestal and impart wisdom to you. It's not that at all. It's this shared from across the table or across a Zoom camera, what we're all going through. And then I just believe that God will, the people that he gathers to you through whatever means, Faithfully, a Facebook page, a conference, whatever reason he's brought you together, then sitting across from each other and sharing those experiences can bring wisdom, can bring healing, can bring greater impact in the kingdom. And so I look at Faithfully, and I set up a couple of different groups. I think I set up one. I'm extremely busy right now. As soon as I'm out of this holiday funk and holiday hangover from ministry stuff, I can start engaging that. But I think I titled one Level Up, and how do we help each other level up our ministry? I created a group for preteen ministry specifically because I have a huge heart for that. And so I just hope it just gathers a handful of people that we can just, all right, hey, what's working for you? What's challenging you? What are you struggling with? And that's just kind of the season that I'm in. I've been fortunate to feel called to children's ministry. There's some other guys like me in my networks that are lifers, that this is their calling and they don't plan to go anywhere else. And so God has given us the opportunity to see a lot of changes in the 30 years of children's ministry. And if that helps somebody that's been at it for a long time or somebody that's new at it, then great. And then I also know I have the opportunity to learn something else from somebody else as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thanks. That's exactly why we're creating it.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll talk more after. How can we be praying for you and your family?
Yeah, I'm in a very interesting season. It's probably been one of the most challenging seasons for me and my family, but it's also, just one where God is just, I think, stripping away the things that have given me sustainable comfort and maybe ease. I've been in career ministry for 30 plus years, and I've been very fortunate to live off of that and make good salary. I've been in small churches and large churches, and always made enough to support my family through those things. And this past year, I was in Colorado for 12 years. My wife and I took a position East Coast, and it just didn't pan out. It's a great church, there's just some differences in strategies and vision and how to get there. And there's some things for me that I found myself for the first time in my life experiencing, like I've never in my life experienced anxiety or stress in a job situation. And for the first time I was. And so we, mutually decided, hey, maybe this just isn't the right fit. So I left, and I left without a plan. Our best worst idea was to head to my mother-in-law's because they needed some help with some health issues and around the house. And so we just decided to do that. And I was going to reboot. I was going to pray about how could I start doing shepherding and coaching and mentoring for people in a niche market, for lack of a better word, that, really people that need it or don't have the money for it and those kind of things. And so along the way, my friend offered me part-time work at his church and full health benefits, which is a huge blessing. And then I got connected through friends with a couple of organizations that do coaching and mentoring, but raise support like a missionary so that when you're fully funded, you can go to somebody who has a need for it, and money's not the reason you can't do it. And so it was something that never even occurred to me to do it that way. And God has opened the door for me to do that with an organization. But I'm just starting where, my wife and I are dividing time between Northern California and Southern California. We're apart for some of the time, and then we come together one place or the other until I've raised my support for this other organization and have a full salary. And that could be 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, 6 months, who knows? But in that time, we're just leaning into God. He's he's showing us that he's taking care of us every step of the way, and he's opening the doors for where I really feel my calling is for this next season, still to children's ministry, just in some different ways, empowering and coaching and resourcing and shepherding others who do it. And I still want to always be engaged in ministry, whether it's part-time or as a super volunteer, because I don't like when, people come to you and say they want to help you in a ministry that they haven't been involved in 10 years. They haven't been around in the trenches at all. So I feel like for me personally, I just always want to stay connected so that I know what's happening in the lives of families, because it changes, rapidly. So God's been good, but I would say prayer just for provision this next season. We can see God working. It's just never on the timing that I want. And so we just have to be, prayer for patience and his provision.
Thank you for that. This was great. Yeah, we'll talk again soon. I'm sure we will.
I love the opportunity to share, God's putting on my heart and share and hear from other people. And so, this is great. Appreciate the time.
That's it for the podcast.